Everyone has problems with their aim on occasion. Sometimes you're simply not hitting your shots, or you feel like the enemy's just leagues ahead of you at times. You're not alone. Everyone feels like this sometimes, even top Radiants get this feeling. So how do you fix this? Well, high-level players know the secret that we're going to be sharing with you in today's video. Let's break it down. You notice this mainly when you're losing easy fights that you definitely feel like you should be winning, only for you to get one-tapped and feel even worse. This can spiral out of control, make you tilted, cause you to D-rank, or just make you feel bad about yourself as a player. The first way you can fix this issue is by first looking at the fights that you're taking. Oftentimes, players who are losing fights over and over are taking standard duels or just bad fights in general. Recognize that a 50-50 fight isn't normally one you want to take if you can avoid it. A good fight is when odds are actually in your favor. A bad or even subpar fight is a simple 50-50, or when the odds are against you. A straight-up 1v1 that both players are prepared for would normally be considered a 50-50. To increase the odds of winning, you always either want to fight with a teammate or use some form of utility to impact the duel. Aim is a major factor in Valorant, but it can't carry you completely. Sometimes the opponent has a slight positional advantage, and your aim alone can't support these duels you're putting yourself in. Advantages come in all sorts of forms. Maybe they have a better gun or a better angle. Maybe you have multiple threats to worry about, but they only have one that you can peek from. Maybe you just don't have enough room to peek the angle effectively. There are tons of things that can impact a gunfight. For this reason, we need to actively pick apart a fight before we even take it. There are a few things to consider once you're preparing yourself to take a fight. The enemy's position. Where are they located? Where should I place my crosshair to ensure that I'm close to them when a fight's about to happen? What utility do I or my teammates have? Do you have a flash? Does your teammate have a drone? Maybe a molly to flush them out of their position? Where are my teammates? Are my teammates prepared to take a fight with me? If not, ask for help. Sometimes it's best to back up and choose not to fight at all, if you're in a position where you don't have to. What weapons do you have versus the opponents? If it's an eco round, don't just charge in alone simply to run into a stack. Play as a team and use utility to scale instead. How many enemies are there, and how many could there be? If there's one opponent, it's usually best to fight with a teammate if at all possible. Try and make sure if you're taking a fight, you're only fighting one enemy at a time. And consider also the utility and what kind of setup the enemy might have before charging into their territory. Could the enemy be playing a crossfire? Could they be setting up a bait? And finally, if you don't know exactly where the opponent is, how many angles will you be exposed to if you decide to take a fight? Use these questions and determine the odds in your head. If you find yourself at a major disadvantage and you have no real reason to take a fight, don't take it, especially if you're defending and it would give the attackers a huge advantage. If you have utility, use it to gain an advantage over your opponents. Drone them out of their angles, flash them to take easier duels, and use your teammates to trade you out or assist you in any given fight. If the odds are low but you have to fight, do everything in your power to even the odds out before you're forced to fight. After the fight's concluded, if you lost, run through these questions in your head. See what disadvantages you had and how you could have gained an advantage before taking the fight. You'll surprise yourself with how many fights you lose with multiple disadvantages stacked up. You should make sure that in any given fight you're prioritizing first and foremost creating good solid fights over simply taking a 50-50 aim duel. You can rely on aim, sure, but sometimes it'll fail you, and when it does fail you a few times in a game, that really adds up in the long run. So be sure you're prioritizing using utility, team play, and positional knowledge to ensure that you're playing these fights to the best of your ability. If you don't have utility to clear angles, defenders could be hiding at crossfires, so wait a bit for your team to pressure elsewhere, call a teammate over to drone, or even just leave and go with your team. If your utility doesn't match with the arena and you have no teammates to help you fight, sometimes it might be best to leave and rejoin your team. If it's not possible, throw off the timings by allowing your team to push first. This will turn your push into more of a lurk than a split take. Keep in mind, many players actually hyper-focus on their aim, when in reality, the biggest issue is their movement. They'll spend hundreds of hours in aim trainers, grinding out scenarios when, in reality, their biggest issue is they just don't know the movement secrets that not only make you infinitely harder to hit, but they also make it easier to land shots. And luckily for you, this is exactly what we break down in our Movement Master in Minutes course, where we spill every little tip the pros use to move like gods. This course is designed to get you caught up to speed as quick as possible, so you can instantly fix your mistakes and start fragging in nearly 10 minutes. We know, it sounds too good to be true, which is why we also back our site with a rank up guarantee, meaning if you don't climb, you don't pay. Imagine that. It's like your local gym promising you'll get ripped. Yeah, not too sure how well that would work out for them, but we're able to offer this because our service has been proven to work. Check it out using the description below, and we'll see you there. Let's take a look at a few fights and see how they could have been played better. Our first VOD we'll take a look at is from Blue Thick Fish. Our Killjoy today is playing on Split. It's pistol round and his teammate dies ramp. He's on top of his comms though and tells his Sova to look out. It turns into a 1v2 and he does a good job of isolating his angles here. He fights the Reyna first and tucks behind cover after winning the duel. Fish has info that Sage was elbow. From here, he decides to instantly wide swing the Sage, and as you can see, is forced to make a correction. What you need to recognize in this situation is not only is Fish at a health disadvantage, but he's also at an angle disadvantage, since he's forced to peek close to the wall to avoid exposing himself too much. In this situation, they have the correct read that Sage is crossed into elbow, but they throw away the round by immediately crouch swinging out into the open. Instead of fighting the Sage like this, Fish should have taken the time to clear and shoulder elbow before wide swinging to get information on the Sage's exact location. This way, he can more confidently position his crosshair and take the fight knowing exactly where to aim. When you're this low health, you cannot afford to brute force your way through a fight, or you will lose nearly every time. This is quite a small mistake, but it's easy to see he was at a clear disadvantage, and it definitely caused them to lose the round. Let's look at another round. Here, our KJ ult is down, and as many of you have probably seen before, his team instantly pushes out. When lockdown's placed, you need to give your opponents time to leave the site before you run in. Otherwise, it's likely you're just going to run into players looking for you to get greedy. Fish gets separated from his team here and is unable to trade as they're displaced by Omen's paranoia. Following this, they successfully clear the first angle enemies and pre-aim the next area, only to get taken down by Omen. Now, surely in this fight, Fish just couldn't aim, right? While most players would take this as an opportunity to hop back in aim labs and get slaving away on that aim routine, let's look at it a bit further. During this round, both of his initiators ended up going heaven. Normally you would want at least one of these guys to use utility to help you take sight, and since our ultimate left a few cubbies that the defenders could hide in, it wouldn't be a bad idea to use some sort of flash to help secure the area. The bigger issue here though is our Killjoy seems surprised that the Omen is here to begin with. Our crosshair placement is okay, but the real fault of this fight is the way we peek the only locations an enemy could be hiding during this round. Notice the first peek as we exit the choke point, it's very sloppy, and we correct our crosshair placement after, and then again with the Omen, we just kinda stumble into him. It's important that you clear every possible angle with purpose. If your team is not there and you're committing to the site, you need to make sure that you're clearing with the assumption that there will be a player in that angle, not that there just may be one. If we slow it down here, you can see that this is exactly what he does. Fish runs his crosshair directly over the Omen, then continues to run, only dropping into a spray when he realizes Omen is actually there. What should happen in the future is simple. Look at the map and locate the locations enemies could be hiding out, and then with each of these locations, deliberately peek the angle with intent. In this case, you will always have the upper hand, because the enemy can only be standing in a small area, whereas you can peek them in a number of different ways. And if you're still afraid, it's okay. Call for a teammate to trade you out, or even get some sort of flash or a stun to flush out the open locations on site. By doing this, they could have secured a kill, making it a 3v4, in a plant, putting pressure on the defenders. This round would have been much different with these two minor changes. Taking a look at one final round, we see Fish take a fight from A main, and then proceed to leave their Brimstone to fight alone. Fish exits site and sits in main holding screens, while Brimstone deals with the player he was fighting. If you notice here, a Reyna Lear is thrown on site right before Omen dies. This is absolutely something Fish should have noticed, because they're reloading when it happens. Remember, anytime you're doing something where you can't shoot your gun, you should be looking at the map. Fish doesn't realize this, and assumes the site is clear, however, shortly dying to the Reyna after trying to walk onto site. In this case, Fish actually had a decent amount of help entering onto site, but was too afraid to take advantage of it. Brimstone actually led the charge, and Sova's drone even went out pretty far, with our Killjoy virtually ignoring both of them. The issue here is Fish isn't thinking about their goals in the round and how to accomplish them. To hop into a mind of a Radiant player, try to view it this way. When you see a drone, or one of your teammates pushing out, you should always be looking to follow them if you can. The last thing you want is for your Brimstone to take all this space and then realize he was alone when he dies. Or in a drone's case, the moment it times out, all that information it gathered will quickly become outdated. Players can move back into position, or even retake the area that it cleared. That's why the moment he sees this drone clearing the way, Fish should immediately push out, looking to capitalize on the information that it gathers. Backing out here shows a clear lack of coordination with his teammates and what's going on in the round. Now, Killjoy might not have a ton of utility for taking site, but you should always think of your teammates' abilities essentially as your own. Sova can't follow up his own drone, so you need to be the one to do it. Radiant and pro players alike use every piece of utility necessary to create as many advantages in a fight as possible. The higher you get in ranks, the more players use utility to create advantages. Abilities in Valorant are tools, right? They're there to assist you to create advantageous duels. Abilities are a part of the game and were meant to be used so you don't just aimlessly find yourself wandering out into dangerous areas. One side will generally hold the advantage based on utility being used. A flash into a tight corridor will flip the advantage from the players holding the corridor to the players pushing it. A counter flash from the players holding the corridor will then flip the advantage back into their favor. Making good fights is give and take, so make sure you're taking as many good fights away from the opponents as possible, and not giving them fair fights if you can help it. Try your best to create as many advantages as possible by running through the questions we talked about earlier before taking your fights, and you will see a drastic difference. From now on, try your best to analyze when you lose fights. See how many disadvantages you truly had in these fights, and then see what you could have done to gain the advantage in them. With that being said, let's part ways for today, but use this list of questions for a while and see what common mistakes you're making in your duels. And it'll benefit you greatly. I'm serious, it will. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little bit more about SkillCapped. So we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and we think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's kind of like getting a gym membership that guarantees you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered you that, but not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium Valorant guides on the entire internet. We add new courses every month with over 1,000 guides curated into over 50 courses, so no one can compare. We also have a direct line of communication with subscribers in our Discord, so you can get connected immediately to some of the best players in the game, who will respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you're serious about improving. So, that's going to be all for this one today. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.